Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. We read in Sahih Muslim, one of the authentic collections of the Prophet Muhammad's Sunnah, a hadith from Jabir ibn Abdullah, in which he said that a man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and asked him, "If I pray only the obligatory prayers, and I fast the month of Ramadan, and I do that which is permitted, and I avoid that which is prohibited, and do nothing more, will I enter paradise?" And the Prophet ﷺ answered, "Yes." After that the man swore, "By Allah, by God, I will not do anything more than that." This is a very important hadith because it explains to us that in Islam, not all of our acts of worship are on the same level, but there are priorities and divisions of actions. First of all, there are the required duties of Muslims. The man mentioned, for example, the daily prayers. As we know, of course, every Muslim must perform the daily prayers in their proper times, 5 times a day. There are also recommended actions, actions which are found in the Quran or in the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, which are mustahab or mandub, which are highly recommended but are not obligatory. And so if a person does not do those actions, they will not be punished on the Day of Judgment. Thirdly, there are actions which are permitted. So this Arab man came to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and said he was going to treat permitted actions as permitted. That means he would be free to do whatever is permitted in Islam, whatever is called halal or mubah. There are also actions which are discouraged in Islam, what is makruh. Makruh means things which Allah is not pleased with, but which will not be punished. So if a person were to do some of these discouraged practices, he or she would not be punished by Allah on the Day of Judgment. And finally, the 5th category, what is called haram, prohibited or forbidden things which are punishable on the Day of Judgment. So we have a graduation of actions on these 5 different levels. And so this hadith makes plain to us that this person came to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and he was an Arab person, an uneducated and simple person. And he said, "I'm going to do these things which are required of me." For example, salat, or the fasting of Ramadan. He did not give the example of Hajj also, the pilgrimage to Mecca, which is required. Now that may be because, as most people know, the pilgrimage to Mecca is a duty for every man and woman once in their lifetime if they can afford it, if they're in good health and can afford to travel to Mecca, then it is a requirement for them to do Hajj. But it's only required that one time, and anyone who is not able for financial reasons or health reasons, then they're excused from doing the Hajj or the pilgrimage to Mecca. It's also possible that this man asked the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ this question after he had already done the pilgrimage, or perhaps during the pilgrimage. And so it wasn't necessary for him to say that he was going to do the pilgrimage. But this does not imply that only prayers and fasts are required of Muslims. But what he said here is that he is going to do whatever is required of him as a Muslim, and nothing more. He is going to treat what is permitted, what is halal, as halal. He is going to do and feel free to do whatever he wants of those things which are permitted in Islam. This category, what is halal, what is permitted, is the widest category. And this is one of the signs of Allah's wisdom and blessing, one of the sources of our gratitude as Muslims. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has required of us a few things in this life. He has only required of us that which is within our ability to do. And He has prohibited from us and forbidden from us some things which are harmful to us. They may be harmful to our health, or harmful to us mentally, or harmful to the societal structure, for example, the family structure. Or He has prohibited us from things which are harmful to our spiritual selves, to our iman, or our faith. So what has been forbidden from us are those things which are necessary that we avoid for our own good, for our own welfare. So the category of what is permitted is very wide. And this person said to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, anything that is permitted, which is not absolutely forbidden, I'm going to do. But I'm going to avoid all those things which are prohibited of me, because I know that those things are harmful to me. And so the Prophet ﷺ said to him that if you do what you have just said, do what is an obligation, perform your prayers and fasting and other duties, avoid what is prohibited, and enjoy all the permitted things of this world, then you will, inshallah, enter Jannah, enter paradise. As Muslims, we are thankful that we are able to enjoy the good food, good drink, enjoy ourselves with what is permitted, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this world for the enjoyment of Muslims, and only we have to avoid those things which are absolutely prohibited. So this hadith carries a wide meaning which is very important for us to understand. If we think of Islam as only a burden on us, there are these things which we're not allowed to do. As a Muslim, I'm not allowed to drink. As a Muslim, I'm not allowed to have sex freely outside of my marriage, committing adultery or fornication or prostitution. As a Muslim, I'm not allowed to take drugs and dance and do things which a lot of people do because they enjoy it. Well, if I think of my religion that way, as this burden upon my shoulders, that's going to give me a negative attitude, and it's going to weaken my faith or weaken my iman. But when we realize that what is permitted is much greater than what is prohibited, that there are many, many good things that I can enjoy as a Muslim, which are harmless and which are beneficial to me, then that will engender in me a feeling of thanksgiving and gratitude. And that is the feeling that we have to have as Muslims in order to truly worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to increase our iman and increase our faith. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam went through great lengths to teach us that there is a difference between acts of worship. That there are some which are required, and there are some that are recommended practices, what is mustahab, or what is called sunnah. For example, he clarified to us that miswak, for example, brushing the teeth with a natural toothbrush or with an artificial toothbrush, if that's available, brushing our teeth when we wake up in the morning, when we're performing wudu, after eating, that is an act of worship, and that's highly recommended. But he purposely did not command us to do this so that we would not think that this was a requirement at all times and places that we do. And so if a Muslim neglects to brush his teeth or her teeth, then they're excused and they are not punished by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that. For example, the Prophet ﷺ emphasized purification, that we perform purification with water if it is available to us before our prayers and at other times and places. For example, the Prophet ﷺ performed purification or wudu before every salat, 5 times a day. However, at some times, for example, on the day of the conquest of Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ did not do his purification except one time. He prayed 5 prayers with 1 purification because he did not break his purification. It was not nullified by any of the natural acts which nullify purification. And so he was demonstrating to us that if it's salat time, and for some reason I still have my previous wudu, it's not necessary if I'm not able to go and repeat the wudu. It's a recommended thing, but it is not necessary. Also, we have the sunnah prayers. It is highly recommended in Islam that besides our obligatory prayers, 5 times a day, which this person promised to do, there are also sunnah prayers. There are actually 10 or 12 rak'ahs of prayers. That is 5 or 6 units of prayer which can be done before and after the obligatory prayers. The purpose of doing those prayers is that in my daily prayer I may be distracted, I may not perform it perfectly and completely. Of course, if I obviously make a mistake in prayer, I have to make up for those mistakes. But if, for example, I perform outwardly my prayer perfectly, but perhaps mentally I wasn't focused, for example. My prayer may not be perfect, it may not be acceptable, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment can take from my daily prayer, if it was not perfect, He can take from these additional prayers which are performed. So it's a great blessing, but it is not an obligation. And so the Prophet ﷺ, for example, when he was on journeys, he did not perform these non-obligatory or sunnah prayers, but he skipped those prayers and he only performed the obligatory prayers and the witr prayer at night, just to show us that the sunnah prayers are not required in all times and places, even though it is highly recommended. Sometimes, as new Muslims, people tend to be very enthusiastic and try to do too much. And they try to perform so many non-obligatory actions that it becomes a burden on them, and they may then give up doing some of those. But the Prophet ﷺ taught us that the most beloved actions to Allah are those in which we are constant. So it's much better if we can do all of our obligations and do whatever sunnah worships we're able to do, and not do too many. Then gradually, as we're used to doing those sunnahs, we can increase the additional prayers and additional fastings and additional worships that we may be able to do up to our level. So that then when we start this habit of doing these non-obligatory acts of worship, we will be able to continue it, God willing, and not give it up. And so it's good for Muslims to take the advice of the Prophet ﷺ and to feel that it is sufficient for us to do what is obligatory, and then for the sunnah practices to do whatever is easy for us, and not to try to do too much at one time of extra prayers and extra fasting, until we are able to gradually develop those good Islamic habits. And that is much better for us than doing too much at one time. وَجَزَاكُمُ اللَّهُ خَيْرًا وَالسَّلَامُ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَةُ اللَّهِ وَبَرَكَاتُهُ.